velvet van, stout, around 50. That's Mrs. Vanderklucken. Her brother came back from Indonesia with malaria, and she's been nursing him. As I sped back down the stairs, ask her how Mrs. Recker's baby is. And Mrs. Vanderklucken, leaving the shop a few minutes later, would comment unmistakably to her husband, that Corrie ten Boom is just like her sister. Public arrests, with no attempt to conceal what was happening, were becoming more frequent. One day, as Father and I were returning from our walk, we found the Grote Market cornered off by a double ring of police and soldiers. A truck was parked in front of the fish mart. Into the back were climbing men, women, and children, all wearing the yellow star. There was no reason we could see why this particular place at this particular time had been chosen. Through. We watched till it turned the corner. Those poor people, Father echoed. But to my surprise, I saw that he was looking at the soldiers now, forming into ranks to march away. I pity the poor Germans, Corrie. They have touched the apple of God's eye.
You'll have a visitor, a young Smith.
Actually, it's two houses. Over 100 years ago, they were joined together. The one in the front is 2 rooms deep and 1 room wide. The one at the back, here, is 3 rooms, one on top of the other.
We need to be as high as possible. It allows for the best chance to reach a safe place while they search below. What's up there? Directly above. Who sleeps here?
I do.
Perfect.
At last, at the very top of the stairs, he entered my room and gave a little cry of delight. "This is it," he exclaimed. "You want your hiding place as high as possible," he went on eagerly. "Gives you the best chance to reach it while the search is on below." He leaned out the window, craning his thin neck, the little beard pointing this way and that. "But this is my room." Mr. Smith paid no attention. He was already measuring. He moved the heavy, wobbly old wardrobe away from the wall with surprising ease and pulled my bed into the center of the room. "This is where the false wall will go." Excitedly, he drew out a pencil and drew a line along the floor 30 inches from the back wall. He stood up and gazed at it moodily. "That's as big as I dare," he said. "It will take a cot mattress, though." "Oh, yes, easily." I tried again to protest, but Mr. Smith had forgotten I existed. Over the next few days, he and his workmen were in and out of our house constantly. They never knocked. At each visit, each man carried in something. Tools in a folded newspaper, a few bricks in a briefcase, wood, he explained, when I ventured to the wonder of a wooden wall, would not be easier to build. Wood sounds hollow. Hear it in a minute. No, brick's the only thing for this false wall. After the wall was up, the plaster came, the carpenter, finally the painter. 6 days after he had begun, Mr. Smith called Father, Betsy, and me to see. Father took the old brass-bound Bible from its shelf. He opened to the reading in Jeremiah where we had left off the night before. Then with sudden inspiration, passed the Bible across the table to Meyer. I would consider it an honor if you would read for us tonight, Father said. Lifting the book lovingly, Meyer rose to his feet. From a pocket came a small prayer cap. And then from deep in his throat, half sung, half pleaded, came the words of the ancient prophet, so fillingly, so achingly, that we seemed to hear the cry of the exile itself. Meyer Mossel, he told us afterward, had been the cantor in the synagogue in Amsterdam. For all his lightheartedness, he had suffered much. Most of his family had been arrested. His wife and children were hiding in a farm in the north which had declined to accept Meyer for obvious reasons. He said with a grimace at his own unmistakable features. And gradually it dawned on all of us that this endearing man was at the BG to stay. It was certainly not an ideal place, but for Meyer, nothing could be ideal right now. Christmas 1943 was approaching. The light snow which had fallen was the only festive quality of the season. Every family, it seemed, had someone in jail, in a work camp, or in hiding. For once, the religious side of the holidays was uppermost in every mind. At the BG, we had not only Christmas to celebrate, but also Hanukkah, the Jewish festival of lights. Betsy found a Hanukkah candlestick among the treasures stored with us behind the dining room cupboard and set it up on the upright piano. Each night, we lighted one more candle as Uzi read the story of the Maccabees. Then we would sing haunting, melancholy desert music. We were all very Jewish those evenings. About the 5th night of the festival, as we were gathered round the piano, the doorbell in the alley rang. I opened it to find Mrs. Becker's, wife of the optician next door, standing in the snow. Mrs. Becker's was as round and placid as her husband was thin and worried. But tonight her plump face was twisted with anxiety. "Do you think," she whispered, "your Jews could sing a little more softly? We can hear them right through the walls, and well, there are all kinds of people on this street." Back in Tanyan's rooms, we considered this news. If the Bunkers family knew all about our affairs, how many other people in Harlem did too? sat. There it was again. A brilliant flash followed a second later by an explosion which shook the bed. Scrambled over the covers to the window and leaned out. The patch of sky above the chimney tops glowed orange-red. I felt for my bathrobe and thrust my arms through the sleeves as I whirled down the stairs. At Father's room, I pressed my ear against the door. Between the bomb bursts, I heard the regular rhythm of his breathing. I dived down a few more steps and into Tante Jan's room. Betsy had long since moved into Tante Jan's little sleeping cubicle where she would be near the kitchen and the doorbell. She was sitting up in the bed. I groped toward her in the darkness and we threw our arms round each other. Together we said it aloud. War. It was 5 hours after the Prime Minister's speech. How long we clung together, listening, I do not know. The bombing seemed mostly to be coming from the direction of the airport. At last we tiptoed uncertainly out to Tante Jan's front room. The glowing sky lit the room with a strange brilliance. The chairs, the mahogany bookcase, the old upright piano, all pulsed with an eerie light. Betsy and I knelt down by the piano bench. For what seemed hours, we prayed for our country, for the dead and the injured tonight, for the Queen. And then, incredibly, Betsy began to pray for the Germans, up there in the plains, caught in the fist of the giant evil loose in Germany. I looked at my sister kneeling beside me in the light of burning Holland. "Oh Lord," I whispered, "listen to Betsy, not me, because I cannot pray for those men at all." And it was then that I had the dream. It couldn't have been a real dream because I was not asleep. But a scene was suddenly and unreasonably in my mind. I saw the Grote Market half a block away, as clearly as though I were standing there. I saw the town hall and St. Bavo's and the fish market with its stairs stepped. Then as I watched, a kind of odd old farm wagon, old-fashioned and out of place in the middle of a city, came lumbering across the square, pulled by 4 enormous black horses. To my surprise, I saw that I myself was sitting in the wagon, and Father too, and Betsy. There were many others, some strangers, some friends. I recognized Pickwick and Toast and William and young Peter. All together we were slowly being drawn across the square behind those horses. We couldn't get off the wagon. That was the terrible thing. It was taking us away, far away, I felt, but we didn't want to go. Somewhere in the night, there was an explosion. The dishes in the cupboard rattled. For an hour we sipped our tea and talked until the sound of the planes died away and the sky was silent. I said goodnight to Betsy at the door to Tante Jan's rooms and groped my way up the dark stairs to my own. The fiery light was gone from the sky. I felt for my bed. There was the pillow. Then in the darkness my hand closed over something hard, sharp too. I felt blood trickle along a finger. It was a jagged piece of metal 10 inches long. Betsy! I raced down the stairs with the shrapnel shard in my hand. I went back to the dining room and stared at it in the light while Betsy bandaged my hand. On your pillow, she kept saying. Betsy, if I hadn't heard you in the kitchen. But Betsy put a finger on my mouth. Don't say it, Corrie. There are no ifs in God's world, and no places that are safer than other places. The center of his will is our only safety. Oh, Corrie, let us pray that we may always know it. The officers took down names, addresses, and other statistics. I counted those who had been arrested with us, 35 people from the raid on the BG. People from previous arrests were sitting in line about on the mats too, some of them faces we knew. I looked for Pickwick, but he was not among them. One of them, a fellow watchmaker, who often came to the BG on business, seemed especially distressed at what had happened to us. He came and sat down beside Father and me. Outside Harlem, the bus took the South Road paralleling the sea. On our right rose the low sandy hills of the dune country, soldiers silhouetted on the ridges. Clearly we were not being taken to Amsterdam. A 2-hour drive brought us instead into the streets of The Hague. The bus stopped in front of a new functional building. Word was whispered back that this was Gestapo headquarters for all of Holland. We were marched, all but Pickwick, who seemed unable to rise out of his seat, into a large room where the endless process of taking down names, addresses, and occupations began all over again. And on the other side of the high counter, running the length of the room, I was startled to see both William and Captain. As each of the prisoners from Harlem reached the desk, one or the other would lean forward and speak to a man seated at a typewriter, and there would be a clatter of sound from the machine. Suddenly, the chief interrogator's eyes fell on Father. "That old man," he cried. "Did he have to be arrested? You, old man." William led Father up to the desk. The Gestapo chief leaned forward. "I'd like to send you home, old fella," he said. "I'll take your word that you won't cause any more trouble." I could not see Father's face, only the erect carriage of his shoulders and the halo of white hair above them. But I heard his answer. "If I go home today," he said evenly and clearly, "tomorrow I will open my door again to any man in need who knocks."
If I stay behind, I will open my door to anyone who knocks for help.
To use my eyes longer. I had been sustaining myself from Scripture a verse at a time. Now, like a starving man, I gulped entire Gospels at a reading, seeing whole the magnificent drama of salvation. And as I did, an incredible thought prickled the back of my neck. Was it possible that all of this that seemed so wasteful and so needless, this war, Sheshagan prison, this very cell, none of it was unforeseen or accidental? Could it be part of the pattern first revealed in the Gospels? Hadn't Jesus, and here my reading became intent indeed, hadn't Jesus been defeated as utterly and unarguably as our little group and our small plans had been? But if the Gospels were truly the pattern of God's activity, then defeat was only the beginning. I would look around at the bare little cell and wonder what conceivable victory could come from a place like this.
Tell me, Miss Tenholm, how can you believe in a God who lets an old man die in prison, his body forgotten somewhere in a pauper's grave?
My father?
I understand he was taken ill after about 10 days. He was taken to a hospital in The Hague. Unfortunately, there were no beds available. He seemingly died in a horrible way. Some failure of organization. Under such circumstances, when no one claims the body, it is difficult to trace.
I know where my father is, Lieutenant.
That will be all, Miss Tenholm. Oh, you have news from home.
The letter had been opened by the censor, held by them too. The postmark was over a week old, but it was a letter from home, the very first one. Why this sudden fear? I folded the paper. "Corrie, can you be very brave?" No, I couldn't be brave. I forced my eyes to read on. "I have news that is very hard to write. Father survived his arrest by only 10 days. He is now with the Lord." I stood with the paper between my hands so long that the daily shaft of sunlight entered the cell and fell upon it. "Father, Father." The letter glittered in the crisscross light as I read the rest. Nolly had no details, not how or where he had died, not even where he was buried. I pulled the cot from the wall, and below the calendar scratched another date. March 9, 1944, Father released. As for Father, they had learned a few more facts about his last days. He had apparently become ill in his cell and been taken by car to the municipal hospital in The Hague. There, no bed had been available. Father had died in a corridor, separated somehow from his records or any clue as to his identity. Hospital authorities had buried the unknown old man in the Pampers cemetery. The family believed they had located the particular grave. At the very steps of the train, I reached out and seized Betsy's hand. Together we climbed onto the train, together found seats in a crowded compartment, together wept tears of gratitude. The 4 months in Szczecin had been our first separation in 53 years. It seemed to me that I could bear whatever happened with Betsy beside me. More hours passed as the loaded trains sat on the siding. For us they flew. There was so much to share. Betsy told me about each of her cellmates, and I told her about mine. As always, Betsy had given to others everything she had. The Bible that Nolly had smuggled to her, she had torn up and passed around, book by book. It must have been 2 or 3 in the morning that the train at last began. At a church service in Munich that I saw him, the former SS man who had stood guard at the shower room door in the processing center at Ravensburg. He was the first of our actual jailers that I had seen since that time. And suddenly it was all there. The room full of mocking men, the heaps of clothing, Betsy's pain-blanched face. He came up to me as the church was emptying, beaming and bowing. "How grateful I am for your message, Fräulein," he said. "To think that, as you say, he has washed my sins away." His hand was thrust out to shake mine, and I, who had preached so often to the people of Blumenthal the need to forgive, kept my hand at my side. Even as the angry, vengeful thoughts boiled through me, I saw the sin of them. Jesus Christ had died for this man. Was I going to ask for more? Lord Jesus, I prayed, forgive me and help me to forgive him. I tried to smile, struggled to raise my hand. I could not. I felt nothing, not the slightest spark of warmth or charity. And so again I breathed a silent prayer. Jesus, I cannot forgive him. Give me your forgiveness. As I took his hand, the most incredible thing happened. From my shoulder, along my arm, and through my hand, a current seemed to pass from me to him, while into my heart sprang a love for this stranger that almost overwhelmed me. And so I discovered that it is not on our forgiveness any more than our goodness that the world's healings hinge, but on his. When he tells us to love our enemies, he gives, along with the command, the love itself. Well into her 80s, Corrie continued her indefatigable travels in obedience to Betsy's certainty that they must tell people. Working and teaching in 60 countries on both sides of the Iron Curtain. To whomever she spoke, African students on the shore of Lake Victoria, farmers in a Cuban sugar field, prisoners in an English penitentiary, factory workers in Yukonistan, she brought the truth they learned in Ravensbrück. Jesus can turn loss into glory. against the back wall. 30 or 40 people were all that could fit in, and still the soldiers drove women over the side, cursing, jabbing with their guns. Shrieks rose from the center of the car, but still the press increased. It was only when 80 women were packed inside that the door thumped shut, and we heard the iron bolts driven into place. Women were sobbing and many fainted. Although in the tight wedged crowd, they remained upright. Just when it seemed certain that those in the middle must suffocate or be trampled to death, we worked out a kind of system whereby half sitting, half lying with our legs wedged around one another like members of a sledding team, we were able to get down on the floor of the car. Do you know what I am thankful for? Betsy's gentle voice startled me in that squirming madhouse. I am thankful that Father is in heaven today. It was hours before the train gave a sudden lurch and began to move. Almost at once it stopped again, and then again crawled forward. The rest of the day and into the night it was the same. Stopping, starting, slamming, jerking. It's bullets, someone shouted. They're attacking the train. Again we heard that sound like tiny stones striking the wall, and again the machine guns answered. Had the brigade reached us at last? The firing died away. For an hour the train sat motionless. Then slowly we crawled forward. At dawn, someone called out that we were passing through the border town of Emmerich. We had arrived in Germany. For 2 more incredible days and 2 more nights, we were carried deeper and deeper into the land of our fears. Occasionally, one of the loaves of bread was passed from hand to hand, but not even the most elementary provisions had been made for sanitation, and the air in the car was such that few could eat. And gradually, more terrible, the crush of bodies in the filth. The single obsession was something to drink. 2 or 3 times when the train stopped, the door was slid open a few inches and a pail of water passed in. But we had become animals, incapable of plan or system. Those near the door got it all. At last, the morning of the 4th day, the train stopped again, and the door was opened its full width. Like infants on hands and knees, we crawled to the opening and lowered ourselves over the side. Of the hill we saw it, like a vast scar on the green German landscape, a city of low gray barracks surrounded by concrete walls on which the guard towers rose at intervals. In the very center, a square smokestack emitted a thin gray vapor into the blue sky. Ravensbrück. Like a whispered curse, the word passed through the lines. This was the notorious women's extermination camp, whose name we had heard even in Harlem. That squat concrete building, that smoke disappearing in the bright sunlight, no, I would not look at it. As Betsy and I stumbled down the hill, I felt the Bible bumping between my shoulder blades. God's good news. Was it to this world that he had spoken it? Now we were close enough to see the skull and crossbones posted at intervals on the walls to warn of the electrified wiring along the top. The mass iron gates swung in. We marched between them. Acres of soot-gray barracks stretched ahead of us.